Forward. Program Director, MEC of Sport, Arts and Culture and Recreation, Ms. Masupye, Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Mr. Zizi, good enough, Kodwa. He is indeed good enough. Ministers and deputy ministers here present, the Premier of our province here in Gauteng, Panyaza Andre Lisufi, MECs and members of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, representatives of political parties here present, traditional and religious leaders amongst us, representatives of civil society, the executive mayor of Mogale City, who wants the African Parliament, the Pan-African Parliament to come here, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, and high commissioners, fellow guests, and all of you who are here, and fellow South Africans and fellow Africans. There can be no better place to celebrate Africa Day than here at the Cradle of Humankind. This is where some of our earliest human ancestors once walked. It is called Maruping, which evokes our return to the place of our origin as humankind. As Africans, we are proud of our history, as we are optimistic also about our future. Despite the plunder of Africa's resources to make other countries rich, Africa rose in defense of her liberty and independence. And today we are the rulers of our own lands on the African continent. Despite conquest, colonialism, slavery, humiliation, racial oppression, and apartheid, and many other acts of barbarism that were directed against the peoples of Africa throughout history, we have prevailed. As President Museveni often says, we are survivors. When the colonialists went to various other parts of the world, they embarked on a mission to exterminate the indigenous people and wipe them out. They sought to do the same with us here on the African continent. But we survived, and we are here, and we are in control of our own destiny as Africans. More than 100 years ago, Pixley Kaisa Kaseme gave a lecture at Columbia University in New York, which he titled The Regeneration of Africa. In his words, the ancestral greatness, the unimpaired genius, and the recuperative power of the race, its irrepressibility, which assures its permanence, constitute the African's great source of inspiration, close quotes. This recuperative power of Africa is one of the reasons we observe Africa Day. We observe Africa Day because we are reminding ourselves of the resilience we possess as Africans. Resilience that has taken us from where we have come, and a resilience that is transporting us to our future. We observe Africa Day to celebrate our unity as Africans and to remind ourselves of the responsibility we all share to bring about an Africa that is peaceful, an Africa that is prosperous, and importantly, an Africa that is united. We know that when we are united, we are formidable. We can overcome even the greatest of difficulties. It was just 3 short years ago that the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed in our continent, Africa. South Africa had just assumed the chair of the African Union in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. The pandemic plunged the world into turmoil. There were well-founded fears that African countries with low levels of development would be devastated as a result of this pandemic spreading across the continent. The pandemic was a great trauma for Africa. Many lives were lost. In our own country here in South Africa, we continue to mourn the lives of more than 100,000 people. Businesses were forced to close and people lost their jobs. But this worst health emergency in living memory did not destroy Africa, because Africans came together and acted as one. The African Union developed a continental response and implemented this response with urgency across all the regions of our continent. We set up a groundbreaking platform to procure medical supplies for African countries and appointed envoys to mobilize resources to help African countries to fight the pandemic. We even assisted countries in the Caribbean, which is the 6th region of our continent. When vaccines became available, we set up a mechanism to acquire them for African countries in need. Our collective response to COVID-19 pandemic gave new momentum to the cause of African integration. We learned as Africans that we have the means, the capacity, and the political will to develop and implement solutions to Africa's challenges. We came together as one and confronted a common enemy, utilizing the skills, the expertise, the knowledge that resides in our continent. We were reminded that excellent world-class expertise exists right here on our continent. It was eminent African scientists, supported by the World Health Organization, that guided and advised countries around the world on their responses and on evidence-based policymaking. It was African researchers here in our country who detected new variants of the coronavirus and alerted the world. We asserted our right to equip ourselves with the tools to prepare for future health emergencies and pushed for the transfer of technology and skills. The greatest lesson we learned as Africa from the pandemic is to value and to nurture our own capabilities. As Pixley Kaisama Seme said, the African is not a proletarian in the world of science and art. We refuse, he continued to say, to camp forever on the borders of the industrialized world. We learned the importance of collaboration between African countries, and that if we work together, we can rebuild our economies, we can restore hope to our people, and chart a new future for our beloved continent, Africa. This year marks 60 years since the Organization of African Unity was founded on the 25th of May in 1963. The words of the founding charter of the OAU, which is the predecessor of the African Union, are as relevant today as they were back then. The charter called for the harnessing of the natural and human resources of our continent for the total advancement of Africans. It called for the building of understanding and the solidarity between African countries to build a larger unity transcending ethnic and national differences. It called on African countries to safeguard and consolidate their hard-won independence, the respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, and for resistance against neocolonialism in all its forms. Our continent has many challenges. In many parts of the continent, battles for control of Africa's natural resources are fueling conflict, instability, violence, and terrorism. Some multinational companies are engaged in unscrupulous conduct that is harming human health and polluting the natural environment. In some parts of our continent, instead of a respect for diversity, divisions are being sown between communities. There are places where people are being persecuted on the grounds of gender, ethnicity, language, religion. We are now also witnessing Africa being dragged into conflicts far beyond our own borders. Some countries, including our own, are being threatened with penalties for pursuing an independent foreign policy and for adopting a position of non-alignment. As African countries, we have painful memories of a time when proxy wars were waged on the soils of Africa by foreign superpowers. We have not forgotten the terrible, brutal legacy of first having our own continent carved up and colonized by European countries, only to find ourselves once more being pawns on a chessboard during the Cold War. We are not going back to that history. We refuse to go back to that period in history as Africans. And this, I will say it once again today, South Africa has not been and will not be drawn into a contest between global powers. We will maintain our position on the peaceful resolution of conflict wherever those conflicts occur. Guided by the lessons of our history, we will continue to resist calls to abandon our independent and non-aligned foreign policy. As Africa, our focus remains on pursuing the ideals of the founding charters of the Organization of African Unity and the African Union, and on giving effect to the aspirations of the AU Agenda 2063. Our eyes remain firmly fixed on the horizon as we work to achieve continental economic integration. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is a landmark achievement for our continent. We are greatly encouraged by progress that is being made towards the coming into operation of the AfCFTA. This includes the commencement of trade on a small scale in parts of East and West Africa, the training of small businesses that is taking place on new trade portals, and moves towards bringing into operation of the AfCFTA Adjustment Fund worth about $10 billion. As South Africa, we reaffirm our commitment to peace building on the continent and to being part of efforts to resolve conflicts in regions such as the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, Northern Mozambique, Sudan, peace and stability, and call upon those who are involved in violent conflicts in these parts of the continent to stop immediately and to restore peace in those countries so that our African brothers and sisters can have peace in their own countries. It is of no use to be destroying lives, to be destroying infrastructure in various parts of our continent. Peace must prevail. The warring parties must sit down and negotiate a sustainable and durable peace. So we call for peace to be installed in Sudan. We call for those who are warring in Eastern DRC to desist immediately with their violent acts, where they are killing women, where women are being abused, where villagers are being uprooted from their homes, and where people are fleeing. We say this must stop. Peace and unity must prevail on our African continent. This Africa Day, we commit ourselves to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, to pursuing national policies that advance gender equality, reduce poverty, inculcate sustainability into all aspects of our lives, and to mitigate the impacts of climate change. Fellow South Africans and fellow Africans, we are a people of many cultures. We are a people of many languages, deriving from many communities, and we are people who have different and many experiences. Yes, we speak different languages, and have different customs, different faiths and different traditions, but we are bound together by the invincible thread that is our Africanness. Our Africanness is our respect for our many differences. Our Africanness is our empathy and compassion for those who are less fortunate. There are times when we do not live up to these ideals of compassion, of caring for one another. There are times when we fall short, but we must continue to strive for these values on an everyday basis. Our Africanness is our largeness of spirit and our capacity to strive for coexistence even with those who have wronged us. Even as we South Africans exercise our national pride, this can never be an excuse to turn against other Africans who live in our country, who live in our midst, and who have sought refuge in our own country. Let us find strength in our diversity. Let us forever strive to find the common ground that unites us as Africans instead of seeking out what divides us. We must remember that there is much and a lot that unites us, and very little that divides us. In the words of the African Union, anthem, let us unite and celebrate together the victories that we have won. Let us defend our liberty, and let us also defend our unity. And let us uphold the bonds that frame our destiny. This is what our forebears crafted when they met together on the 25th of May in 1963. As we march to 2063 and continue to build the Africa of our dreams, let us continue to be united and together say, Maibuye i-Afrika. Maibuye. Maibuye. Happy Africa Day to all of you. Thank you.